33 Marines against an entire regiment. Over 2,000 Japanese soldiers charging through the darkness. His men were dying, his guns were overheating, and Sergeant Mitchell Paige refused to retreat when the last machine gun jammed. He did something no one thought was possible. August 31st, 1918, Charleroi, Pennsylvania. Mitchell Paige was born to Serbian immigrant parents. His original family name was Pegic. From Herzegovina, his mother told him stories of the Battle of Kosovo, warriors who stood against impossible odds. But she also told him to be a proud American. Every Armistice Day, young Mitchell watched the Veterans Parade through his small Pennsylvania town. World War I Marines in their dress blues. Mitchell made a promise to himself that day. He would become a Marine. On August 31st, 1936, Mitchell Paige turned 18. He hitchhiked 200 miles to Baltimore, Maryland. Walked into the Marine Corps recruiting station and enlisted. Boot camp at Parris Island was brutal, but Paige thrived. After training, he was sent to sea duty aboard USS Wyoming, then to Cavite in the Philippines. In the Philippines, Paige joined the baseball team as a pitcher. In 1937, he went 55 wins and only 17 losses. He became a legend among his peers. But the good times wouldn't last. In 1940, Paige was transferred to China. The tension between Japan and the West was escalating. One night in Beijing, Paige was at a bar when a Japanese officer tried to attack him with a samurai sword. Paige beat the man senseless with his fists. It was a preview of what was coming. By 1941, Paige was back in the United States. He was helping build a new Marine Corps training base in North Carolina that would become Camp Lejeune. Then came December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Sergeant Mitchell Paige was immediately shipped overseas with the 7th Marine Regiment. First to Samoa, then to a place no one had ever heard of, Guadalcanal. August 7th, 1942. The 1st Marine Division landed on Guadalcanal, America's first major offensive operation of World War II. The objective was Henderson Field, a strategic airstrip the Japanese were building. If the Japanese completed that airfield, they could threaten Australia and New Zealand. The Marines had to take it and hold it. Paige landed with the 7th Marines in September. He was a platoon sergeant commanding a machine gun section. 33 men, 4 machine guns. Their mission was to defend the perimeter around Henderson Field. The Japanese were determined to take it back. October 24th, 1942. Paige and his platoon were ordered to a ridge south of Henderson Field. Intelligence reported a massive Japanese buildup. An attack was coming. Paige positioned his 4 machine guns along the ridgeline, overlapping fields of fire. Behind them were 2 rifle companies. Paige's job was simple: hold the line. If the Japanese broke through, they'd reach the airfield. His commanding officer's final words echoed in his mind. "You gotta hold this line. You have to hold this line. Otherwise they'll break through and go to the airport." That night, Paige crawled forward in the driving rain. He rigged a makeshift tripwire in front of their position. C ration cans with empty cartridges inside. If the Japanese approached, the cans would rattle. An early warning system. October 26, 1942, 3 a.m. Paige was awake in his foxhole. Rain poured down. The jungle was pitch black. Then he saw lights. Dozens of them, moving through the jungle toward his position. Japanese assembly lights. They were massing for an attack. Moments later, the tripwire rattled. The Japanese were here. Paige gave the order. Open fire. 4 machine guns erupted. Tracers lit up the darkness. Japanese soldiers fell by the dozens. But they kept coming. Wave after wave of infantry. Screaming, charging, dying. Paige moved from gun to gun, directing fire, encouraging his men. The Japanese artillery opened up. Shells screamed overhead and exploded along the ridge. One of Paige's gunners was hit, killed instantly. Then another, and another. The Japanese closed in. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted. A Japanese soldier lunged at Paige with a bayonet. The blade slashed deep into Paige's left hand, nearly severing his fingers. Paige pulled his crowbar knife with his right hand and drove it into the enemy soldier's throat. The man dropped dead. Paige wrapped his bleeding hand and kept fighting. More Marines fell. Wounded, dead. The position was being overrun. The 2 rifle companies behind Paige's position began to fall back. Paige and his machine gunners were now isolated, exposed. One by one, his gunners were killed or wounded, until Paige was alone. 33 Marines had started the night. Now it was just him. Against over 2,000 Japanese soldiers, Paige made a decision. He would not retreat. He ran to the first machine gun, cleared the jam, opened fire. When that gun overheated, he ran to the second. Then the third. Then the fourth. Back and forth, gun to gun. Never stopping, never slowing. The Japanese couldn't understand what was happening. They thought they were facing a full platoon. But it was just one man. One Marine who refused to die. At one point, a Japanese soldier fired directly at Paige. Paige leaned back at the last second. The bullets whizzed through the tiny space between his neck and chin. Miraculous. Paige returned fire. The soldier dropped. For hours, Paige held that ridge alone. Firing, reloading, moving. Japanese bodies piled up in front of his position. Then, just before dawn, he heard something. American voices behind him. Reinforcements had arrived. A few Marines from the rifle companies. Paige looked at them, covered in blood, exhausted. But his eyes were on fire. The Japanese were preparing for one final push. Paige made another decision. They weren't going to defend. They were going to attack. Paige yelled to the Marines behind him, "Fix bayonets and follow me." He unclamped one of the machine guns from its tripod, loaded it, threw 2 ammunition belts over his shoulders, and cradled the 30-pound gun in his arms. Then he charged. Down the hill, straight at the Japanese, firing from the hip. The other Marines followed with fixed bayonets, screaming, attacking. A Japanese officer jumped up. He fired his pistol at Paige, emptied the magazine, then drew his samurai sword and charged. Paige cut him down with a burst of machine gun fire. The bullets hit the sword in the officer's chest. He fell. The Japanese broke. Disoriented by the ferocity of the counterattack, they retreated into the jungle. The battle was over. When the sun rose over Guadalcanal that morning, the ridge was still in American hands. Henderson Field was safe. 98 Japanese soldiers lay dead on the ridge. 200 more in the ravine below. Paige stood among his fallen men, covered in blood, shaking. He walked to his pack and dumped out the contents. A New Testament fell out. It was open to Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Paige looked up at the sky. God was with us, he told his commander. On May 21, 1943, in Melbourne, Australia, General Alexander Van de Grift presented Mitchell Paige with a Medal of Honor. Paige had been promoted to second lieutenant. When General Van de Grift handed him the medal, he said, "You are the first enlisted Marine in my division to be awarded this medal." Paige looked at the general and replied, "This Medal of Honor belongs to all 33 men. In my platoon on Guadalcanal, Mitchell Paige continued fighting. He served at Cape Gloucester, New Britain. In 1944, he returned to the United States. He spent the rest of the war training new Marines. After the war, Paige stayed in the Marine Corps. He rose to the rank of colonel. He retired in 1959 after 23 years of service. In his later years, Paige became a fierce defender of the Medal of Honor's integrity. He worked with the FBI to identify imposters who were selling or wearing fake medals of honor. He successfully lobbied to increase the penalties for stolen valor. On November 15, 2003, Mitchell Paige died of congestive heart failure at his home in California. He was 85 years old. He was the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the Guadalcanal campaign. Mitchell Paige was buried at Riverside National Cemetery with full military honors. This is what heroism looks like. Not the kind that asks for recognition, but the kind that does what needs to be done. Mitchell Paige could have retreated. When his men fell, when he was alone, he could have pulled back. But he didn't. He held that ridge. One Marine, 4 machine guns, 10 hours, against an entire Japanese regiment. And when reinforcements arrived, he didn't rest. He attacked. That's the spirit of the United States Marine Corps. If you want to hear more stories of forgotten American heroes, hit subscribe. These men deserve to be remembered.